Hey, what's going on guys? So today we're actually installing the manual transmission finally. We've got all the bits and pieces we need, and we've also got the boys out here today to help. So the first thing we're going to do is line up the clutch into the R154 gearbox. I did actually try to mount the clutch onto the back of the motor earlier in the week, but I've since been told that we actually have to lift it up with the gearbox at the same time. There's an issue with the bell housing fouling the trans tunnel if you do it with the clutch already on the car. So that's why we're going to do it this way. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay, so I've got some brake cleaner here. The idea is that we'll be cleaning the clutch pressure plate disc as well as the clutch disc itself, and before it goes up on the car I'll be doing another clean of the flywheel as well. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so a combination of the clutch release fork and the pressure plate will go on to the gearbox first, and then finally we'll put the clutch disc on. Just keep in mind that there's a direction that these go on. So on this face it says transmission side, so obviously it's going to go in sort of that way. Alright, so I managed to get the fork in. You just have to make sure that it slides straight onto the release hub, and that should be nice and tight now. So we can go ahead. I'll just give the pressure plate another quick clean, and then we can put the clutch disc on, and then that's it. She's pretty much ready to lift up. Okay, so one thing we forgot, I had to take that clutch back out and the fork. You need to put a little bit of high performance grease just on the center shaft, and then put the clutch on. We've also put a little bit on the center of the clutch hub release bearing, which I probably showed you in the last video. So yeah, that's now ready to go back on. We also want to put a tiny bit on the clutch fork, as well as the center pin that aligns the clutch fork. And now we're ready to put that bad boy back in. So you want to make sure you line up the pressure plate in place first. There's only one way the clutch fork will also sit. You can see that there's the pin is closer to the transmission side. Cool. Okay, so now that's on, I'd like to give that a little bit of a quick clean again. It was relatively clean already, just because of fingerprints. We'll give it a wipe. Clutch disc is already clean, and as I mentioned before, there's a transmission side, so that's going in first. We might want to put a little bit of grease just on the inner side of that as well. Okay, so that's pretty much done for now. Now I want you to take note of a couple of different holes on the pressure plate. There should be 3. So we've got one there, one down the bottom and one at the top there. We'll be using that to align the pressure plate to the dowels that are on the flywheel, just to line it up. If we do find that they're out a little bit, we just got to turn the pressure plate just so it lines up. Now one thing before we move the gearbox to under the car is obviously we've got to take off the shift lever. I believe it's just a rubber boot and a couple of probably 4 screws underneath that boot. So I'll just go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we're using a 10mm here just to get these off. there you go. It's out. I'm just going to put a marking on this so I know which way it came out. I'll just put a bit of paint pen here so I know that's the front. And just made a mark just so we know which way it came out of the gearbox. That's obviously facing the front. I'm going to drop it a tiny bit.
Yep, I got it.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Whoops.
The thing flew up.
Oh yeah, handle. Is it all good? Yep, that should be fine. We've got a bit of space here.
Can you push the control door? I can't seem to move it at the moment.
It's alright. Yep, that's beautiful. You light it real good now?
Yep.
Are you all good?
Yep.
Alright. We are basically in position, I believe.
Yeah.
Are we all good?
I think we're all good.
Alright, if you hold the box there.
Yep, got it. You got it? It's a little bit wobbly.
I hope I got it. We might need 3 hands on this.
Yeah, let me stop. Okay, so we've got the gearbox lifted up. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze because of the clearance from the trans tunnel to the bell housing. So the people that mentioned that you can't put the clutch on before putting the gearbox in, you're totally correct. So
and
now,
also the dump pipe, sorry, as well.
Also the dump pipe was causing a little bit of clearance issue because it's a big ugly stock one, which is going to get removed hopefully soon. To get it up into place, we have to jack it up slowly and move it forward at the same time. And now we've finally got it lined up where the lower bolts are ready to be screwed in. So we've got the lower bolts here, and they go on from the back. We just need to put a tiny bit of Loctite 243 or 242 on there. Let's do that now. Okay. We'll basically start with doing some of the lower ones and the ones we can reach from the bottom of the car, and then we'll have to pivot the gearbox basically to get to the top bell housing bolts. Okay, so remember those sort of dowel alignment holes that I mentioned at the start of the video? So we've got one of them here. Now we need to line that up to the dowels that are on the flywheel. So I think there's roughly one just above me, one towards the bottom, and another one on the other side towards the exhaust. So the one I can see is just above me, so I'm gonna try my best to line that up through the little inspection hole. Alright, so what we've done here, I've actually had Ash move the crank so we can get the flywheel dowel lined up in the inspection plate. And now we've got that alignment hole just there. So we just really have to push in the pressure plate so it lines up with the dowel now. Okay, Ash, you can come back if you want. You can take it out. Hey, we're almost there, but I'm not sure if we need to.
Well, how about we do this? How about we get him to...
Okay.
How's it going, man? How are you? How about we get Ash to turn the crank, see if it spins with it at the same time?
Okay, Ash,
I think she's
Still a bit of a gap here. I can't remember if that... Yeah, I mean, it'll probably pull it in once we start screwing it in.
I'm assuming because we've only got 2 bolts basically. What just happened there?
Keep going or stop?
No, I think that's it. I think it just seated one of them.
Just seat it in?
Yeah.
Because I felt it sort of pull itself. Yeah, it looks like the big ones are all facing that way, Chris.
Yeah.
And the little ones the other way.
Alright, Ash, can you get some more thing now? Alright, so we've done the lower bell housing bolts. We're gonna do the top ones now. They're a little bit thicker thread. What I've done is put some Loctite on there, and we're just going to use the impact gun to actually tighten it up. It's a number 17, and I've just got a U-bolt on the end as well, just to aid with getting the right angle. To do the top ball spite, we're going to have to lower the gearbox a tiny bit. So it's held in by the lower bolts now. So when we lower the back of the gearbox, it's actually going to tilt the engine with it. So that will give us enough space to then put the top bolts on.
The bolt itself is too long and it's hitting the firewall.
Okay, so we're just trying to get the top bolts to line up. We've actually had to tighten the lower bolts just to pull the gearbox in a little bit. And now we'll be dropping the rear of the gearbox down again, just so we can reach the top bolts. Okay, we've got the top bolts on. You can probably just see it there. And now I'm just going to do the pressure plate bolts before I do the starter motor. So what we're doing now is just going around and firstly putting in the bolts with some Loctite on the pressure plate. So I just got someone turning the crank. So as we're turning around, each bolt sort of comes into view of the inspection hole, and just threading that through. Once we've got all the bolts, this is the last bolt at the moment. Once we've got them all lined up, I'll go through and follow the star pattern to then tighten up the pressure plate bolts. Okay, we've got the pressure plate all torqued down. Now the only thing that's left is the starter motor bolts. So there's 2 just there, and then we can basically put the gearbox mount back on and then put the tail shaft on. Once we're done with that, I can then put in the clutch slave cylinder and start bleeding the clutch. So we're just about to put the starter motor back in. The reason we're putting this in now is because one of the upper bolts for the starter motor, we actually have to reach from the top of the gearbox just to make it a little bit easier. So I'll put that in now.
Good Krish. Krish.
Yeah. What's up, bro?
Triangle confirmed.
Oh, Illuminati.
Do you reckon when you're done and you do this conversion, do you reckon it'll be faster than the Not Evo? Do you reckon?
I think it will be, eh?
I think that Not Evo is not that quick, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's not an Evo, you know?
Yeah, that's the problem. It doesn't even have real full drive system, that's what I heard.
Yeah. I mean, what is drift mode?
Yeah.
What's that all about?
I don't know, man. Who drifts these days? I think drifting was a sport in the 80s, wasn't it, or something?
I think so, eh?
I'm not too sure.
They use like these old shitbox Corollas and stuff.
Yeah.
Just cut a hole in your firewall, mate.
Just get the hammer out and we'll massage it into place.
Where's the ball? It's behind my hand. Now my hand's stuck. Okay, so we've tightened the starter motor up. It's all torqued to spec. Now I've also put on the clutch slave cylinder. To get that on, it's a little bit more difficult because now you've got the clutch fork in place, so you have to sort of use the slave to sort of push it back into place. When tightening these, make sure you do either side at a time, like go slowly and put it in, otherwise you can strip that bolt because of the pressure that's on there. Now that that's done, we're going to do the clutch slave flexible line. There's a bracket So I made this, connected it up, and you can see the bracket there. That actually comes off the bell housing bolt that's just there, so I'll mount that up in a sec.
Something like this.
Something like
Oh,
that.
sorry, it goes like this.
The other way around, yeah. So that mounts up like that, and then aligns this hard line to the clutch sleeve. I feel like there probably was another bracket on the factory manual body of these cars that probably came and mounted to this second section here, but I don't think it's that essential that we need it. But if I do find that there's a little bit too much flex on this line, I can add a custom bracket in place if I need to. So I'll go ahead and mount that all up and then show you guys how it looks. Okay, so this is connected now. We've got the bracket on the bell housing bolt. I've tightened these up. They're just 10 mil bolts there. Okay, so normally you'd use a flange spanner for here, just to make it easier to tighten it, but I'll just use a normal 10 mil. Now, as I mentioned before, I think there definitely was a bracket here that sort of is welded on to the sheet metal of the car. I don't have one, so I'm probably going to rig something up from this lower bracket that's actually a ground cable that goes onto the bell housing. So I'll probably make something from there. Just grab basically a plate and bend it from Bunnings. So now I'm just going to put this ground cable on, which goes here, and then we can put the gearbox mount back on. Just before we lift up the back of the gearbox, I remembered we've got to put the starter motor back on, or the connections for the starter motor. So there's a 12 mil bolt as well as a little plug for the solenoid. So now that that's done, we can move to putting the rear end of the gearbox up and putting the mount on. Isn't that right, mate?
Yeah, mate. Going up some boost, about 15 pounds extra.
Yeah. And then?
So 35 pounds.
Yeah.
And then we fry the diff.
Sounds good. And we swap that out.
Yeah.
Cool.
We just use the BRZ diff that's out the front there.
Yeah. We've got a spare right there.
Yeah, we'll be fine, mate. We'll be fine.
Sounds good. Yep. So one thing we forgot to mention was that there's a gaping hole on the back of the gearbox, which is actually for the factory manual speed sensor, which is a combination of the sensor itself and a gear, a ring gear. So I'm going to try and figure out how this all goes together and put it in, and then we can put the transmission mount back on. So we've got the ring gear and we've got the sensor itself. It came with a little C-clip, as well as we believe is a spare rubber, what do you call that? Rubber seal.
Rubber seal, yeah.
So now to put it together, you essentially just slot this straight in until it fits. You can feel it's now tight because it's against the sensor. And this C-clip, there's a little bit of a cutout here. Essentially, you just want to push in the C-clip like so. So now that's fully connected, and we're just going to put a tiny bit of general purpose grease or general lube just on that ring gear. Okay, now that that's done, you essentially just slot straight in the transmission. And there it is. There's just one, I believe it's probably going to be an M6 or M8 bolt that goes straight through there to keep it tight. Now, because I'm not actually using the manual ECU, nothing's going to be connected to this at the moment. So I'll just tape up the end so it doesn't get corroded or get any dirt inside there. But when I do eventually start using the manual ECU or go to an aftermarket ECU, this sensor will become useful. So I'll go ahead and finish that off, and then we can lift up the gearbox. Okay, so I had a bit of a stuff up. I forgot to buy the bolts that mount the actual transmission mount onto the transmission. So we had to go make a few runs around, and we found some high tensile bolts. So these will do for now. Also got some washers to go along with it. If at a later date I end up taking this mount off again, I'll probably swap them out for the OEM Toyota ones. But For now, I think these will do. What do you reckon, mate?
Yeah, should be right. If it falls out, falls out.
What's going on?
Oh. You got it.
So there's 4 of these bolts, 2 on either side. So I'll just thread them on now, and then we can get the transmission mounted up and make some progress.
Do you reckon once you get the whole car going, Krish, it'll beat some Evos,
Oh mate,
but some not real Evos?
I think that's a given at this point. Knowing about not Evo,
Not Evo, yeah.
you know, it's a white versus white sort of thing going on.
I heard it only did like a 1 minute one. That's what I heard. That's the true timing, but I don't know. I could be wrong. I wasn't there. What do you?
You know, look, nobody was there to prove it, so we'll just have to.
We just have to see. We just have to see how we go.
See how we go out there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. So what we've got 2 now. So basically, what we've done this mount here. Then we're gonna mount the back. What put fuel, oil in it. Sorry. Oil it up, and then attach the shaft and everything. You wanna do that?
Yep. Put the shaft on. Exhaust doesn't really matter too much because she's loud as it is.
And go from there.
Straight back.
All right. We'll see how we go.
Alrighty.
Alrighty. So what are you doing there, Krish?
So we're just putting some thread locker on the actual transmission mount.
Yep. And we bolted the top ones.
Bolted the top ones in.
Yep.
We forgot to actually put some Loctite on there, so we just put that in and torqued it up.
Yep.
Now we take this
mount.
bad boy.
We got the bolts for it here. Yep.
Now I'm not sure if this is meant to go a particular way.
Okay.
It's got one arrow there and one arrow there. Whether or not it's completely straight, I'm not sure, but we'll find out.
Yeah, no worries.
Seems like it'll line up, so all seems good. I've got
Which one do you want to do the little nutties first?
So there's 4 nuts just on the underside of this mount. Okay, so we're just about to undo the filler plug and fill her up with oil just before we put it up higher and put the mounting on. So it's a 24 mil. And she's in there quite tight. There we go. Get open.
And is that because when we jack the box up, what's the clearances like over there? Sorry, I can't see.
It's not too bad, but this just makes it a little bit easier because you've got to get your finger in there to see where the level's at.
Yep.
I know it's on a little bit of an angle, but now that we've cracked it open, we can actually lift it up a little bit so it's a little bit more flat and then fill her up. So we'll go and get the filler pump and fill in some Redline MT90.
Okay.
Alright, so we put the pump straight onto the gearbox oil bottle and we've got a little filler neck here.
Yep.
Just gonna put that straight into the filler hole.
Yep.
Start pumping her out. And the gearbox is meant to take about 3 litres, but I've heard it actually takes about 3.5 from a new gearbox.
Yeah, so
now
what do you...
basically we're going to fill it up until we can feel it come out of the filler hole. And then we're going to level the gearbox out a little bit because it's on a bit of an angle. Fill it up a little bit more and then that's it. We'll put on the filler cap and we're done.
Sweet, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. So we're subbing in and out just to give this a bit of a pump.
You moved the jack, didn't you?
I moved that up a little bit, but we can go more. Okay, we've got that mount on. Just putting the jack down now. We can actually move the jack out of the way. Just send it that way. Yep. Okay. Now we're just going to grab the tail shaft and basically mount that up, and then we just got to bleed the clutch.
It's lubed up.
Just use a knife.
I don't think we have a knife. Do we have a knife here?
Yeah, we've got a cutter. We've got a
Right.
Stanley knife in the drawer. Just put it down. Just hold it. Okay, we're just about to put the tail shaft on. Now the back of the gearbox already has some grease back on the rear seal and also on the main spline. So we're just going to put a little bit more on the tail shaft itself, lift that into place and do the 2 center mounts, and then we can mount up the rear section. Oh fuck, this is heavy.
Alright, Krish, hold up, one sec. I'll squeeze in.
Okay, now, can you pass me? There's a washer and a bolt,
Yep, that's it.
and there's a washer on the spacer.
Yep.
Okay, so the spacer goes on top.
Yep.
We thread through.
You put some thread lock in it?
Yeah, I did.
Is that better?
Let's watch your arm. Okay, just let it. Okay, now we just got to line up the back. What is that lining up? I'll have to loosen this a little bit.
Can't do it with the camera hanging.
Nope. I think we have to take it out completely. Fold it. So hold up. Which bit are you holding? Because you gotta hold the back.
Yep.
And I'll hold this bit.
You got it?
Yep. Right, now put in the back.
Yep.
Can you try and line a bolt up into place?
What are the actual bolts? This is Ash. He's a legend in the casting. Let's just fix the transmission.
Okay, so we're putting the rear tail shaft bolts on now. We managed to get the center shaft bolts on, so that's all up and on there. And yeah, we're just finishing off the back, then we can bleed the clutch, start the car.
Can this rotate?
Okay, so we bled the clutch. Now we're just gonna put the shifter back on, start her up and just see how it feels, see if everything sounds right. It's a little bit tied up against the trans tunnel there. Whether or not I have to cut a little bit more, we'll figure that out later. It's easy enough to drop the transmission mount a little bit and get that sorted out.
Yeah, recording.
Ready?
I can't make it.